Hi. First, I have to apologize for being a little couple days late here. I've been buried in midterm papers, as I'm sure you have. Um, my first thought is that I must have hit the jackpot with um, with you all. You have really engaged in this class, in the readings, in your forum discussions, um, encouraged and supported each other, um, and um, and really dug in and are helping each other to expand your understanding of the topics we're covering. Um, and I'm learning a lot from you. Um, so, just recapping our week, um, uh, there are um, there's so many delightful things that happened in your conversation about childbirth and natural childbirth. You, you, like all good social workers, you really explored the socio-political and economic context of childbirth, and really, it's impossible to examine anything, excuse me, from our ecosystemic perspective um, without looking at the context. In this case, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the commodification of childbirth and the marginalization of mothers in that process. Um, from a sociological standpoint, that all began in the 50s with the professionalization of um, uh, childbirth and child rearing. You may have heard of Benjamin Spock, who actually became the expert on child rearing and dictated to mothers exactly how they should raise their kids. And corporations jumped right in there. And so mothers were actually following Dr. Spock's um, directions to a T, because they were afraid if they didn't, they would be bad mothers. So you were supposed to let your baby cry so many minutes and only feed your baby so often, and it was all regimented. Um, and there are so many ways in which our own self-care, as you mentioned, and our care of our children have been um, uh, appropriated by experts um, and and capitalized on by uh, larger corporate interests. Um, so um, I guess I'm sounding a little like a conspiracy theorist, but there you go. Um, I know when I was pregnant with my daughter, I read lots of stuff while I was pregnant, and the minute she was born, I figured, we're two perfectly intelligent women. I'm sure that we can figure this out together. And I actually chucked all the books out, and we did just that. We figured it out together. Your discussion of Peng, you were very ambitious discussing nutrition and development and drugs, um, um, and these are all extremely important issues when we're thinking about pregnancy and childbirth. And so thank you for initiating our conversation about those things. The issue on teen pregnancy, the issue of teen pregnancy is fascinating, and I love the way you looked at it from many angles, many perspectives. Um, as you point out, isn't it interesting that teens who become pregnant have been pathologized, um, and um, and they're focused on in terms of the risk factors that lead to this terrible thing of teen pregnancy, um, and all the negative outcomes. Um, and you know, as you pointed out, somehow or other, the teens themselves are demeaned and sidelined in this conversation. Um, and it was so important what you pointed out, Nathan, that the research just does not bear out this other idea that teens are poor, always and always single mothers, and there's kind of a unspoken theme that they're also African American, and none of that is true. And so one must question the role of academic and institutional classism and racism in this whole discussion of teen parents. And this is not isolated to teen parenting. At one point, I did a study of all of the articles that mentioned Native peoples, all of the articles over a 10-year period that were referenced in social work abstracts. And that's a periodical that includes every social work article. And I found something like 760 articles, and guess how many talked about strengths? Did you guess? 0. So the master narrative, as Toni Morrison describes it, has really taken up a lot of airtime in the conversation about lots of social theories, which brings us to that to the question of critical theory related to your upcoming, or the essays that you're in the middle of. Sorry that I posted that email, Moodle sent that email 9 times. It kept telling me it wasn't sent, and then I look in my history, and there it is, 9 times. So at least you know I love you. Anyway, critical theory, as I pointed out, is basically related to looking at social issues from and economic issues, political issues from outside of the master narrative. And so understanding the societal structures, the structures of classism, racism, oppression of various stripes, and on the other hand, working to change those structures so that they are not unjust. I hope that helps in your formulation of your thoughts about Zitz and Jeanette this week. If you want to, you can just pick one critical theory. For example, you can, if you want to talk about Jeanette just in terms of feminist theory, you could talk about Zitz just in terms of post-colonial theory, but also feel free to write about them in these more general terms of critical theory. Another issue that occurred to me is that I might want to tell you this story related to pathologizing young women. Um, at one point, I was teaching in a state college in Rhode Island, and I went to the local community health center to see how I could be useful. And the person I talked to said, "Oh, you have to help the pregnancy counseling people. They have these huge caseloads, and there's this explosion of teen pregnancy." Um, and so I talked with them, and I asked them what the issues were. And it turned out, as we looked at the files, that there were all kinds of structural issues that were problematic. One was that the younger the girl was, the more likely the perpetrator was to be much older. And so that was interesting. So, you know, getting a girl a Coke and giving it to her on a playground might be, you know, all the connection she needs to feel like she's trusting this older person if she lives in a family where she doesn't feel supported. So I asked them, well, what have you done about it? Well, we don't know. We're just overwhelmed with our caseload. So I said, well, let's go to child welfare, because these girls were like 12, 13, and the perpetrators were like 30, 40, you know. And so we were just taking that group of girls, the very youngest ones. And so we went to child welfare, and guess what? Child welfare didn't want to handle it because there was no, the perpetrator was not a family member. And then we took it to the police, and the police did not want to handle it because there was no complainant. Maybe this guy had been helpful to the family in some way, kind of working his way into the good graces of the family by buying groceries or something like that, and made the family in some way dependent on him. And so there was nobody willing to be a complainant, to accuse him of doing a crime, to press charges. So that was interesting. So we ended up in lots of meetings with state legislators and the police department and child welfare, and at various conferences trying to educate people about this issue. So that's just another angle on the same issue of adolescent pregnancy. So thank you all for a most excellent week. The last thing I wanted to mention is that most of you are posting annotated bibliographies rather than literature reviews. An annotated bibliography is the reference and then a description of that particular article, and then a series of those. Literature review, on the other hand, is your own synthesis of all of the literature that you have researched, so that the reader gets an idea of what all is understood and known about that topic at this point, and then the references are at the bottom. However, your conversations are so good, and this, your way of doing it seems to be working. So if you would prefer to do annotated bibliographies, that's fine with me. Or if you want to do a proper literature review, that's fine, but there'll be no negative consequences either way. It's your choice. And that's just because you guys are wonderful. I can't wait to to read more of this week, and I'll see you later.